Hi, everyone. Welcome to Spilling Our Tea, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices of Asian women who are rewriting the rules of success. We're all about sharing the real, raw stories of women who have started their own businesses, leading in their industry, and they're overcoming barriers and are carving out spaces where we can all thrive, not just survive. So, this podcast exists because our stories matter, and I believe it so. I'm Sandy Casano, Korean, Japanese, American, first generation immigrant, and third culture kid who is a coach for Asian women and a speaker for hire, and your host for today. So I'm here to amplify the voices that have been overlooked and silenced for far too long. So through Spilling Our Tea, my mission is to support and empower Asian women by prioritizing our mental health. So let's dismantle that model minority myth and encourage all of us to show up as our true, unapologetic selves. So Spilling Our Tea is sponsored by Joyful Optimist Coaching, where we support founders and entrepreneurs who desire to make an impact in this world. And we encourage them to build businesses that are abundant, centered, and joyful. And we know that you can be both successful and joyful. So you can book a complimentary clarity call at joyfuloptimist.com. So on today's show, we have Shang. Shang, can you educate me on how to pronounce your last name?
Shang Saavedra.
Shang Saavedra. Shang Saavedra is the founder and CEO of Save My Sense. Yes, a personal finance education and coaching platform that focuses on the intersection of mental health and financial wealth. I love this. Her ethos is that changing one's finances isn't merely about making or saving more money. In her mind, personal finance is personal and thus related to one's upbringing and past experiences, family history, and more. And it requires bravely facing the traumas and fears of one's past and tracing how they lead to mindsets grounded in scarcity and insecurity, especially as they relate to handling of money. Oh my goodness. Welcome, Shang. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm honored.
Amazing. Shang, can you begin by revealing the story of your parents? Because I think this has an influence on how you view finances.
Yeah, and sorry, my first name is Shang, like alone. Shang.
Shang. Thank
Yeah.
you, Shang.
Okay, great. All right. I come from a wonderful family, Chinese American. So my parents and I were all born in the People's Republic of China. And together, we all left when I was around 3 years old, basically immigrated to a couple of European countries, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and then ultimately landing in the United States when I was 10 years old. My parents really valued education, getting ahead by doing well in school, and I was the only child. And so throughout my life, they really impressed upon me the importance of doing well education-wise and going to a good school. On top of that, I was always under the impression growing up that I would need to take out loans to attend any university in the United States. So imagine my huge surprise as a junior in high school applying to school who my dad told me that he would be able to pay for all of my college tuition, which is mind-blowing. I was like, where is all this money coming from? Because I thought we were poor. We lived a nice middle-class life, but to teenager and little Shang, I didn't see a lot of travel, didn't see a lot of eating out, not much in the way of luxury. I mean, even the cars that my parents drove are no longer in production today because that's just how terrible of a car they were. But they led frugal lives. And through their frugality, they saved and invested their money. And that really inspired me to do the same coming out of school with my very first paycheck.
Now, I want to touch on that word frugality, Shang, because I think that can be very people have different judgments on what that means. And I was listening to you on your YouTube channel, Save My Sense, and you had this one episode on the joy of frugality, and just talking about that. Can you share with the audience your perspective on what that means when you speak of frugality?
Yeah. And I make a huge distinction between being cheap versus being frugal. Because I think we come from a society and culture where, especially as an Asian American, you're very often judged by what people perceive to be your spending. And if you don't look like you're successful in the worldly terms, you don't look like you're carrying luxury brands or being generous with your friends, you're perceived as cheap. And my parents probably were perceived as cheap growing up, but I would say that they were frugal in that they knew they had big financial goals, including affording 4 years of private college tuition for me. And to do so, they needed to pare back spending in all the areas where this did not matter. So going on vacations did not matter to them. Wearing fancy clothes did not matter. But what did matter? Making sure that I had all the education that I needed, making sure that I played piano at the time, that they could afford my piano lessons, that they could save up the money. And so when I talk about joyful frugality, I'm talking about aligning your spending with your value system and making sure that when you do spend, it's against goals and values that matter to you, and that you don't spend in areas where they don't. And because financial independence and financial freedom is so important in my life, I appear to be frugal in many aspects, because you need to have savings and have investments in order to become financially free. And so therefore, I really talk about the joyfulness of that intentional frugality.
This opens up so much for me, because there's two things I want to make sure we capture. One is your story, right? The one where you achieved financial independence at an age when most people aren't even thinking about retirement. So I guess I want to start there. How did you do it? We know it's, through this concept that you have, but and we understand your motivation, but can you just tell us a little bit more about that journey and that choice that you made for yourself?
Yeah. So I achieved what is called FIRE, financial independence, retire early, meaning that you don't really need to work for the rest of your life for money in order to sustain your life. And this happened when I was just 31 years old. And I would say that was not my original goal. As a child of immigrant parents, I was taught growing up, get educated, get a good job, and become rich, like make a ton of money. That was my life. And in my early 20s, I definitely pursued that, richness, like try to make as much money as I can from my job, try to climb the corporate ladder, get promoted, get as close to the C-suite, maybe even become a CEO one day if you could. And I did that. I also went to business school, and through a combination of scholarships and some support from my parents, I would say I also had a lot of luck on my side that I never had to carry student loans because of all of this. So that also put me ahead of a lot of people. But throughout all of this, I knew the math, and I saw how my parents modeled it for me, that if you live on less than you make, you have savings, and you can take those savings and invest it in like the stock market, and that can kind of become your retirement nest egg. So I knew that as a young age, and I did that. It wasn't until I got really burned out from chasing the corporate life, chasing that CEO, trying to be rich, when I was like, what if I don't want to be doing this forever? What if I don't want to wear the corporate mask, this personality that I have to put on and hide so many parts of myself, and just do whatever I would like? And also, by the time I met my husband, there's also the question of, well, as a woman, there's also the childcare component. If you choose to become a mom, that's going to impact your career. That's when we deliberately chose to learn to live off of just one income, thinking that I may become, a stay-at-home mom one day. And inadvertently, by really, really paring back our expenses and investing the rest, that's when our network took off. And eventually I discovered that we met this FIRE definition by the time that I was age 31. And that's when I realized, wow, this kind of intentional living can really unlock the peace and freedom that most people don't have. And that's when I started sharing about it on social media and coaching people to, I mean, I don't expect everybody to reach it at this age, but at the very least, there's so many things that you can apply from what I've learned into your life to at least accelerate your own financial journey.
I love the words that you use, Shang. You're using words like intentionality and alignment, and just it sounds so purposeful. And talking about finances is hard. Um, it gets very personal and judgmental, and scary. People don't like to talk about it out loud. What do you make of that, especially for Asian women?
Yeah, we're a judgy society. We judge people based on our appearances, our perceived success through our jobs and what we do. We're judged on whether we have children, whether we choose not to have children. We're judged on everything. And that's a very toxic part of existing in this culture, is that there's constant pressure to live up to some pretty much impossible standard. And I'm of the belief that the more we talk about something, the less shame there is that exists in it. We need to bring things that feel shameful to light to make people feel that vulnerability, but then that also leads to healing. And one of the core principles that I tell everybody is, regardless of how much money you make, regardless of your net worth, regardless of how much money you have, that does not need to define whether you see yourself as a good or bad person. Struggling with finances doesn't make you a bad person. Your struggles can come from very, very deeply painful experiences that likely came out of your childhood or your culture. And if we can heal that, you not only heal your pain and those sources of shame, but also as a byproduct, your financial journey gets better as well. So I'm all about that positivity and spreading that message.
Yeah, and how do you prioritize and maintain your well-being while pursuing your financial success?
There is this framework that I discovered during the time that I was really paring back my expenses. Because imagine, I'm in my mid-20s, just graduated from my MBA program. All my friends are making bank six figures. We all lived in the heart of New York City. Everybody was living it up. And here I am. I'm not necessarily going to everything. I wasn't traveling as much. I even turned down, a destination wedding invitation or two. And I felt absolute shame. Like, why am I so different than my classmates? And is this going to lead me to become an outcast? And I realized that for as much as I was paring back, I still had legitimate psychological needs. I was lonely. I wanted friendship. I was stressed out from work. I needed a way to let off steam. And I often also struggled with depression and anxiety through my life. I needed to get that treated. When I realized that the core things that I sought were very legitimate psychological needs, I got into therapy. That was the first thing. That was amazing. Like, I was so scared of therapy up to my mid-20s until I finally just did it scared and tried. I was like, oh my goodness, where has therapy been all my life? Why didn't I do this before? And then being stressed out by work, I realized I don't need to travel really far to feel less pressure from work. Local trips, even around, the five boroughs of Manhattan, there were really, five boroughs in New York, there were really great places that I could visit for cheap. And then hanging out with friends didn't have to be an expensive meal out. Like, a good friend will happily walk around Central Park with you, grab a coffee with you, eat at home, because they cherish my friendship. And so throughout those very, very lean years, I met my psychological needs through these activities that really got to what I needed, but didn't necessarily have to, break my bank in order to be achieved.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing your choice to go into therapy and saying it out loud, because I know that it can be very taboo, not just in Asian culture, but in particular. And, just understanding that we all need some sort of support, and that, as you said, gosh, it feels so good once you're in it. It just isn't what people think it is. So it can be, through coaching or therapy, there can be some really important explorations instead of bottling it up inside.
Choosing to work on yourself does not mean that there's anything wrong with you or should be a source of shame. It's actually a sign that you are trying to be healthy, that you are trying to be strong and courageous. And originally, bless my parents, they thought that there was just something super wrong with me to pursue therapy. But now I'm like telling everybody, like, if you're struggling with something mental, like, definitely check out mental health resources, consider therapy, consider medication. There's nothing wrong with doing that to try to better your brain.
Absolutely. And let's talk about what you had just shared in regards to this attachment we have with what's missing in our lives and how we can we attach it to money, right? And this will bring me happiness or fill a void. You were saying, if you're lonely, and we all, I think, have been conditioned to think like, to hang out with friends, we got to go get a drink or go to a bar, go to have a meal. It has to be tied around a certain activity. And you're saying, well, no, if what you're trying to fill the void is companionship, there's lots of ways to do it. What advice would you give to someone who's fearful maybe of letting go of some of these attachments?
When you're going through transformation, like you go from one lifestyle to another, there are relationships that do get changed. It's actually a big test of the strength of your existing both friendships and also familial relationships as well. And I will say that there was maybe a year or two where the nature of several of my friendships that I thought were very worthy to have completely got altered because I pursued this more frugal, less focused on money and achievement type of lifestyle. But if you are pursuing the value that truly does feed your soul, like going in, and this is going back to the intentionality, that this is important to you and that this is going to be meaningful to you, then wouldn't you want to then spend the rest of your life around other people who honor that, other people who support you in that cause, and the people who drop you because of your changing lifestyle? Well, maybe that wasn't meant to be. Like, maybe that was a great friendship and great relationship for a former life, but if you're pursuing a newer life, then those relationships will change. And I'm not saying that it's easy. It definitely wasn't easy. I definitely felt a lot of hurt and sadness and grief, and that will be a part of it. But coming out and now being years out on the other end, I would say, yeah, it was worth it. And I don't fault the changing, relationships that I have around me. If even it allowed me to truly cherish the ones that I have now, because I'm like, yeah, they like the new me, and I appreciate that.
It's kind of the rock bed of friendship, true friendship. Yes, is to weather those storms. And just to underscore what you were saying too, that there are people in our lives that will fall off, and they are meant to go through the entire journey with us. I was thinking again back to what you were saying, and I realized for myself, like in my relationship with my partner, we almost equate date night to like dinner out, something of that nature. That, but we're also on this journey and path to be, experience financial freedom. And so I love having the opportunity to redesign what date night can look like, where it isn't always tied to, because it's more about connection, right? That's technically what date night should be about. How can we connect and grow together, not how do we have a good meal?
there's nothing wrong with bonding over food, and I definitely have my share of eating out with my husband. We both are foodies, but I would say, just make sure that it fits into your budget and that it's not, causing you to not be able to achieve this greater financial goal that you have. But if it works, then there's nothing wrong with it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So if someone's listening and they're like, I want this for myself, like I have a financial goal or a lifestyle or something that I want to be able to attain, maybe it is financial freedom by, age 30. Where do they begin? How do they begin?
Yeah. And I do talk about this in my forthcoming book, Wealth is a Mindset, which comes out in January 2025, is that most people think that they need to start with a budget. They think, okay, I need to allocate money to rent and to groceries and my car payment. And I'm like, actually, it's not that. If people dive into numbers right away, you might miss out on a very important step, which is healing yourself. And so the first place that I start with is, where did all of your beliefs and all of your sort of habits around money come from? And we're going to dive into your childhood and also recent young adult memories that may have impacted this. And I ask people to think, what was money like growing up? What did your parents or your guardians or your influential adult figures do or say around money? And then have there also been recent, highly stressful situations, oftentimes romantic breakup, death of a loved one, change in life circumstances, such as a huge change in your job? How have those events impacted you? And try to find patterns. And once we recognize the patterns, that's when we can finally get to work and say, hey, do you think that the patterns you're experiencing or the beliefs that you have, do you think that they're right? And if you think that they're not, you want change, then I use this framework called trigger, action, reward, where we recognize when your mind gets triggered into these bad habits or old behaviors, and we catch you in the act, and we teach you how to change that behavior when you're in the middle of it, so that you reorient your mind to a more joyful, more purposeful place. And this gradual change happens probably over a few months, at least takes a few months for it to take effect. But then once it works out, then the process of budgeting and saving money, the actual nitty gritty of learning how to invest and how to negotiate for more income, that will all come as part of it. And my book talks through that. But it's your mindset and your mental health that we have to address first and foremost.
What is it about finances that really permeate our mental well-being? What do you think?
At the core, to approach finances in a productive way, it actually engages some of the most executive decision-making parts of your brain. You have to be able to think without emotions. You have to be able to plan ahead, be analytic, strategic, engage in multiple scenarios in your brain at once and decide. Those functions are hard for our brain. It engages essentially the prefrontal cortex of our brain. And if your brain is sick at any point, and I define sickness as it could be, a brief episode of anxiety, it could be very deep-rooted mood and personality disorders. That means that when your brain is sick, it's not functioning at its best. Just like when we wake up with a cold, we're not at our best. And then that makes it hard for our brain to do all of the functions that it needs to do well at personal finance. And therefore, I focus so much on the mental health component, because I'm like, if your brain can even be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% better at functioning, then all the functions you need to do well at personal finance would also improve.
Absolutely. And what you're just saying, Shang, too, is that, when we are making these choices, not in our prefrontal cortex, but in the part of our brain where we are in survival or in fear, we're not making the best of choices, are we? We're doing them out of, a fear-based response, which, can only take you so far and doesn't really get to see or experience kind of healthier long-term effects, because you're looking at a very short-term momentary, oh, I got to protect myself right now.
Yeah, it can lead to a very classic, people call it fight or flight syndrome. Now there's also freeze or fawn as the additional versions. You could make a very emotional decision where you're like, I'm going to ignore the numbers. I'm just going to do this because my heart is in it, whether it is mathematically going to work out or not. And you may temporarily feel better because your brain is trying to protect itself. It is trying to get you to a better mental state. But some of these fear, scarcity driven decisions don't necessarily work out in the long run. Like, for example, just an extreme example, a lot of people in very low income situations often take out payday loans to make their next payment. Understandably so, because they need the money right away to cover rent, cover food. But those payday loans just have such extremely high interest that in the long run, it makes your debt situation far worse.
Yeah, great example. And yeah, just so in alignment with what you do and how I coach as well, and just being able to get people to a point of understanding that they have more choice and agency than they might perceive that they have, especially when it comes to making executive decisions that impact their lives, especially when it comes to finances. Big question for you is, can money buy happiness?
I think money can make life a lot easier. So I definitely don't discredit the fact that if you can cross a certain income threshold, you don't have to fear getting evicted. You'll have a functioning car. You can afford healthcare, which includes mental health care. You can do a lot of things that don't add stress to your life. That is beautiful. And I think that's really important for most of us to get to so that we can function properly and have the rest that we need and the time to then think ahead and think of, accomplishing dreams. But then after a certain point, money does not buy more happiness in a linear fashion. So it's not like, for every additional dollar that you have, you're going to be happier by 1 point or something. And what you'll then see on the other extreme end is, these extremely rich families, like the billionaire families of the world, where you do see them spend endlessly on anything that money can buy, yachts and private jets and things that I could never even dream of affording. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they are billions of points happier than the rest of us. They're not necessarily so. So I'd say find a happy medium where your needs are met and you can have some nice things, but then recognize that beyond that, more money doesn't create that same amount of return. And being content and grateful for where you are in the moment is actually the goal. And that's the goal that I also teach.
Beautiful. Shang, can you tell our readers where they can get more information about how to get your book coming in January and where they can find you?
Yeah. My website is savemycents.com, cents as in cents and dollars. So you'll find the book pre-order link there. I'm super active on Instagram and YouTube. So if you find me on Instagram, it's Save My Cents. YouTube, same, Save My Cents. Definitely reach out. I'm always more than happy to talk through this stuff because it is my goal to change your money lives 1 cent at a time through focusing on your mental health.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for being here and spilling the tea with us today. Your journey and insights are not only inspiring, but also just a testament to the power of embracing who we are and listening to our voice so that we can be on the path to strength and joy and financial freedom. Yes?
Yes. Thank you, Sid.
So to our listeners, if this conversation resonates with you, my one ask is that you share it with someone who could use a little inspiration today. So these stories and the conversations we're having around mental health and all these various topics are how we create greater connection and understanding. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and stay tuned so you don't miss a single episode. And if you're looking for a space to connect and grow, join our community at joyfuloptimist.com/spilling our tea. So together we're here to spill the tea on real stories, mental fitness, and living authentically. Thank you so much for being a part of the journey. Thank you, Shang.
Thank you, Sandy.